Hello and welcome to the first lesson on poems in the Power and Conflict anthology. Today we'll be covering Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley. Let's start off by listening to a reading of the poem, and I can think of no one better to provide this than Bryan Cranston, the American actor who starred in such hit series as Breaking Bad and a personal favourite of mine, Malcolm in the Middle.
I met a traveller from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away.
So, now that you've heard the whole poem, it's time for some analysis. Let's start with the title, Ozymandias. This is the Greek name given to the Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses II. He was a ruler of the New Kingdom, a term historians use to describe the later period of ancient Egypt. A host of successful military campaigns, many of which were conducted by Ramesses II himself, made the New Kingdom the most powerful and prosperous period of ancient Egypt. So the poem itself ties in really nicely with the themes of power and conflict. As we go through the poem, I'll be including some more relevant contextual facts about Ramesses II and about Shelley himself. Let's start with lines 1 to 2. Shelley begins the poem with the first person pronoun of I, which makes it seem as if we're going to hear the speaker's own perspective. However, this quickly changes as the focus shifts to a traveller from an antique land. The fact that the traveller is unnamed and that the land is antique or ancient highlights the great lengths the speaker is going to distance himself from what's about to be said. This makes perfect sense when we consider that Shelley intended for the poem to be a critique of, or allegory for, King George III, who was on the throne when Shelley wrote the poem in 1817. Like Ozymandias, King George III was also involved in a range of military conflicts. As an anti-monarchist, Shelley held a great deal of contempt for such rulers, but by opening the poem in this way, he is able to explore these feelings without making it too obvious that they're his own. In lines 2 to 5, the unnamed traveller talks of what's left of Ozymandias' statue. Shelley uses the adjective vast to describe the legs. This signifies the large physical size of the statue, but it could also allude to the desire of expansionist rulers to occupy as much land as possible. It's interesting that Shelley also uses the adjective trunkless here. This literally means without a body or a base, but could also be hinting at Shelley's view that the immense power monarchs claim to have is baseless and unjustified. When describing the material and position of the legs, Shelley uses enjambment and alliteration. The enjambment forces us to linger on the fact that the legs are made of stone, which is significant for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it highlights the fact that all that remains of Ozymandias is a statue. Secondly, it reinforces Shelley's depiction of Ozymandias as a cold and scornful ruler. It reminds me of how some people are idiomatically described as having a heart of stone, meaning they're unfeeling and pitiless. Similarly, the rather hard and abrupt-sounding alliteration of st in stone and stand seems to point to the obstinate determination of Ozymandias to maintain his standing as a ruler, even long after his death. In line 4, Shelley describes the visage or face of the statue as half sunk by the sand. This shows how even the mightiest of structures will eventually be consumed by the forces of nature and time. It's helpful to note here that Shelley was a romantic poet, which means that he belonged to a tradition which often emphasised the power of nature. The violent verb shattered emphasises this even further. The verb lies is especially noteworthy here because it's ambiguous. On the one hand, it could be taken as a literal description of the face of the statue lying down in the sand. On the other hand, perhaps Shelley is branding rulers like Ozymandias as liars. He could be suggesting that the whole enterprise of building statues and monuments is a form of self-deception, since it clearly does not achieve the immortality that so many rulers desperately seek. In terms of imagery, Shelley hones in on the face by highlighting its frown, wrinkled lip, and sneer. These three pejoratives are joined by the repetition of "and" in a technique known as polysyndeton. This shows just how strong Ozymandias' contempt for his subjects is, and the hard alliterative sound of cold command also cements Shelley's depiction of Ozymandias as a tyrannical ruler.
Wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command, which sort of implies that he wasn't a particularly pleasant man. He was a man that looked at other people in a disdainful way.
Looking at lines 6 to 8, we're told that the person who made the statue accurately captured Ozymandias' negative emotions, or passions. In line 7, Shelley contrasts these yet surviving emotions with the lifeless things they're stamped on. This reminds us that while Ozymandias' search for immortality was in vain, the art depicting his true nature is able to endure. This could mean art in the sense of the sculpture, or indeed in the form of the poem itself. The hand that mocked them is, again, ambiguous. It could refer to the sculpture's mock-up or creation of the statue, or it could mean mocked in the sense of making fun of someone in a contemptuous way. I'm personally inclined to say that the latter is more likely, since the impression we get of the sculptor is that they were able to see Ozymandias for the cruel ruler he truly was. Line 9 refers to the pedestal, which is the base upon which a statue is mounted. This also reminds me of the idiom to put someone on a pedestal, which is to admire someone so much that you think of them as perfect and faultless. This is quite appropriate here, as it seems like Ozymandias put himself on a pedestal. This is reaffirmed in lines 10 to 11, in which Shelley paraphrases the inscription on the pedestal of the real-life statue of Ozymandias. "King of kings, Ozymandias am I. If any want to know how great I am and where I lie, let him outdo me in my work." Shelley's use of the possessive pronoun my in both My Name is Ozymandias and My Works once again highlights the ruler's possessive nature, especially when it comes to his reputation. This is ironic, since a person's reputation, by definition, isn't something that can be owned by the individual. It refers instead to the beliefs and attitudes of others towards the individual. Let's also consider the title Ozymandias gives himself, King of Kings. While this literally means a king who rules over lesser kings, Christians often use it to refer to Jesus Christ himself, something that Shelley would have been well aware of in 19th century Britain, where Christianity prevailed as the dominant religion. There is further irony here, especially when we consider the fact that Shelley himself was an open and staunch atheist, a stance that actually ended up getting him expelled from Oxford University in 1811. It therefore seems as if Shelley is making fun of Ozymandias' belief that his power is divine. Shelley's dual use of the imperatives look and despair further showcase Ozymandias' authoritarian nature. The ye mighty reads like a challenge for others to outdo his power, and the exclamation mark that closes line 11 is further evidence of his tyranny. Finally, in lines 12 to 14, there is a stark shift in tone. We move from Ozymandias' exclamatory imperatives to a bleak description of nothing, reinforcing the futility of the ruler's pursuit of eternal glory. Shelley's depiction of the statue's decay echoes the earlier imagery of the half-sunk, shattered visage in line 2, emphasising the inevitable downfall of even the greatest monuments. Despite the statue's enormous size conveyed through the description of what's round that colossal wreck, the alliterative phrase boundless and bare highlights the emptiness and hollowness of Ozymandias' arrogant pursuits.
Colossal wreck, it's like, it kind of shows the futility of how humans are actually just strive to control what we can't control. Immortality doesn't exist.
Yes.
And colossal wreck, that's the perfect juxtaposition. He was massive, Ozymandias, King of Kings.
As a pacifist, Shelley would have been particularly critical of the immense cost required to build such large empires, a process almost always accompanied by violent conflict and bloodshed. Further alliteration in lone and level, and the sibilants in sands stretch far away, contribute to a tone of soft sadness and resignation, emphasising the transience of human power in the face of nature. For further analysis of the poem, please refer to the flirt table on the accompanying worksheet. And remember, I've been sharing my analysis of the poem. The examiners want you to share your own informed, personal response to it. So while you can certainly use my analysis to give you some ideas, you ultimately need to develop your own take on it that can be backed up by relevant references. The best way to do this is to focus on what you personally find most interesting about the poem, thinking about what the words or phrases remind you of, and tying them into the themes of power and conflict. Now, on to the quiz. I've designed these questions to help you consolidate and review the key points discussed in this video. If you haven't already, grab a pen and a piece of paper. I'll be asking 10 multiple choice questions about Ozymandias. I'll read each question once and I'll pause to give you some time to write down your answer. After I've asked all the questions, I'll read out the answers so that you can give yourself a score out of 10. Here we go. Question 1. Ozymandias is the Greek name for which ruler? Is it A, the Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses II, B, the Macedonian king Alexander the Great, C, the Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses III, or D, the British king George III? Question 2. True or false? Shelley begins the poem in the third person. Is it A, true, or B, false? Question 3. Shelley was an anti-monarchist. What does this mean? A, he did not believe in God. B, he was against the king. C, he believed in God. Or D, he supported the king. Question 4. Which of the following is an example of enjambment? Is it A, I met a traveller from an antique land? B, half sunk a shattered visage lies? C, cold command? Or D, two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert? Question 5. Cold command is an example of which poetic technique? Is it A, alliteration, B, enjambment, C, polysyndeton, or D, sibilance? Question 6. Which of the following is another word for passions? Is it A, ideas, B, emotions, C, hobbies, or D, goals? Question 7. Which self-given title does Ozymandias share with Jesus Christ? Is it A, the Great, B, King of Kings, C, Lord, or D, Son of God? Question 8. Why was Shelley expelled from Oxford University? Was it A, because he was married twice? B, because he was a pacifist? C, because he was an atheist? Or D, because he spoke out against animal suffering? Question 9. Look and despair are both examples of what? Is it A, adjectives, B, derivatives, C, superlatives, or D, imperatives? Question 10. What type of poet was Shelley? Was he A, modern, B, postmodern, C, romantic, or D, classical? Now it's time for the answers. For question 1, Ozymandias is the Greek name for the Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses II, so the correct answer is A. For question 2, Shelley does not begin the poem in the third person. Instead, he begins it in the first person before quoting the traveller. So the answer is B, false. For question 3, Shelley was an anti-monarchist, meaning that he was against the king. Anti means against, and monarch means king or queen. So the answer is B. For question 4, two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert is an example of enjambment. Enjambment is when a sentence runs over into the next line, and the slash between stone and stand signifies the start of a new line. So the answer is D. For question 5, cold command is an example of alliteration. Alliteration is the use of the same letter or sound in words close to one another. In this case, both words begin with the letter C, so the answer is A. For question 6, emotions is another word for passions. The poem tells us that the sculptor accurately captured Ozymandias' passions or negative feelings, so in this case the answer is B. For question 7, King of Kings is the self-given title that Ozymandias shares with Jesus Christ. This title appears on the pedestal of the statue. So the answer is B. For question 8, Shelley was expelled from Oxford University because he was an atheist. In other words, he got kicked out after it was revealed that he didn't believe in God. So the answer is C. For question 9, look and despair are both examples of imperatives. Imperatives are words or phrases that express commands. So the answer is D. And finally, for question 10, Shelley was a romantic poet. In other words, he belonged to a movement that, among other things, emphasised the power of the natural world and of emotions. So the answer is C. Remember to count your score to see how you did on the quiz, and don't forget to use the accompanying worksheets to revise and further your knowledge of Ozymandias. See you in the next video.